The credit card reader beeped its rejection for the third time, and Elena Marsh watched the color drain from the nanny's face as completely as it was draining from the child's lips. The boy couldn't have been more than 7, his small chest heaving with the effort of pulling air into lungs that were betraying him, and Elena knew, with the cold certainty that came from watching her own mother suffocate slowly over 18 months, that he had maybe 10 minutes before his brain started dying from oxygen deprivation. The pharmacy's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that sickly yellow glow that made emergencies feel even more desperate, and the other customers were backing away from the counter like witnesses at an accident scene, nobody wanting to get involved, everyone pretending they didn't see the child dying right in front of them. "Please," the nanny begged, her accent thick with panic, tears streaming down her weathered face as she fumbled through her wallet again, pulling out cash that they both knew wouldn't be enough. "Please, I have 200. I can get more tomorrow, I promise, please." The emergency inhaler and nebulizer solution cost $340. Elena's manager, Mr. Chen, stood in his office doorway with his arms crossed, shaking his head with the kind of cold finality that came from running a business where inventory shrinkage meant his own bonus disappeared. She'd worked at Morrison's Pharmacy for 4 years, knew every policy, understood every rule, and had watched Mr. Chen fire 2 people for giving unauthorized discounts on insulin. The boy made a sound like a drowning animal, his fingers clawing at his throat, and Elena felt something inside her chest crack open the way it had in the hospital room when her mother's breathing had finally, mercifully stopped. "Where are you watching from?" Elena's hands moved before her brain could catch up with the consequences, reaching under the counter for the emergency inhaler, breaking the seal with a snap that sounded like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Mr. Chen shouted something from his office, but she was already around the counter, dropping to her knees beside the child, her pharmacy training taking over as she shook the inhaler and positioned it at his blue-tinged lips. "Breathe with me, sweetheart," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands, and she demonstrated the technique her mother's respiratory therapist had shown them years ago. Slow exhale, press and inhale, hold for 10 seconds. The boy's eyes were wide with terror, his small body rigid with the primal fear of suffocation, but he tried to follow her instructions, and Elena felt the medication release into his airways. 1 breath. 2. 3. The blueness started to recede from his lips like a tide pulling back from shore, and Elena grabbed the nebulizer kit, her fingers flying through the setup she could do in her sleep. The nanny was sobbing, openly now, her hands hovering over the child as if afraid to touch him, afraid she might somehow make things worse, and Elena understood that feeling too, the helplessness of watching someone you love struggle for air and knowing you can't breathe for them. She got the nebulizer mask over the boy's face, turned on the machine, and the familiar hiss of medication turning to mist filled the small consultation room where she'd guided them, away from the staring customers, away from Mr. Chen's furious glare. "What's his name?" Elena asked, keeping her voice calm, soothing, the way the nurses had talked to her mother during the worst attacks. "Lucas," the nanny whispered. "His name is Lucas." "Okay, Lucas, you're doing so well. I need you to keep breathing slowly, just like this." Elena demonstrated again, exaggerating her breaths, making it a game, and the boy, Lucas, fixed his enormous brown eyes on her face and tried to match her rhythm. She could see his oxygen levels improving, the panic receding, his small shoulders gradually relaxing as the medication opened his airways. 15 minutes, she told herself. Just 15 minutes to make sure he's stable, and then she'd deal with whatever came next. She'd lost her mother to a disease that no amount of money could cure, but she'd be damned if she let this child die because his nanny's credit card wouldn't work. Mr. Chen appeared in the doorway, his face purple with rage. "My office. Now." "He needs 15 more minutes," Elena said without looking up from Lucas, whose breathing was finally starting to sound less like a death rattle and more like actual respiration. "You're fired. Security will escort you out the moment that child is stable." The words should have hit her like a physical blow. She had $87,000 in student loan debt, rent due in a week, and exactly $243 in her checking account, but all Elena felt was a strange sense of calm. She'd made her choice the moment she'd broken that seal, and she'd make it again. Her mother had taught her that some things were more important than money, more important than rules, more important than survival itself. Compassion was one of those things. Human life was another. Lucas's breathing had almost normalized by the time Elena heard the vehicles pull up outside. Not one car, but three. Black SUVs with tinted windows that screamed money and power and danger. The nanny's face went white, then red, then white again, and she started babbling in what sounded like Russian, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. Elena kept her focus on Lucas, checking his pulse, his oxygen levels, making sure the attack was truly over and not just pausing before another wave hit. She'd seen enough asthma emergencies during her clinical rotations to know that status asthmaticus could be tricky, could seem to resolve and then come roaring back. The pharmacy door chimed, and suddenly the air pressure in the room changed. Elena looked up and understood immediately why the other customers were pressing themselves against the far wall, why Mr. Chen had gone silent mid-rant, why the nanny was on her knees with her head bowed. The man who walked through the door moved like violence contained in an expensive suit, flanked by 8 men who looked like they ate bullets for breakfast. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair shot through with silver at the temples and eyes the color of a winter storm. His face was all sharp angles and controlled fury, beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful, and every person in that pharmacy recognized him on some primal level as someone you didn't cross, didn't question, didn't even look at directly unless you wanted trouble. But it was the way his expression shattered when he saw Lucas that made Elena's breath catch. The cold mask cracked completely, revealing raw terror underneath, and he was across the pharmacy in 3 long strides, dropping to his knees beside his son with a grace that shouldn't have been possible for a man his size. His hands, scarred knuckles, expensive watch, hands that had clearly done terrible things, touched Lucas's face with infinite gentleness. "Papa," Lucas whispered, and the man made a sound like something breaking. I'm here, Sinochak." His voice was rough, accent present but controlled, and then those storm-gray eyes fixed on Elena with an intensity that made her want to step back. Who helped him? The nanny started explaining in rapid Russian, gesturing at Elena, at the nebulizer, at the discarded inhaler packaging, and Elena watched the man's expression shift through several emotions too quickly to track. His men had spread out through the pharmacy, and she noticed that all the other customers had mysteriously vanished. Even Mr. Chen had retreated to his office, and suddenly Elena was very aware that she was alone with a man who radiated danger and a child who was the only thing keeping that danger leashed. "You did this?" He looked at Elena, really looked at her, and she fought the urge to fidget under that predatory gaze. "You gave him medication without payment?" "He was dying," Elena said simply, because what other explanation was there? "I wasn't going to let money decide whether he lived. You don't know who I am. I know you're a father who almost lost his child. That's all that matters." Something flickered in those cold eyes. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. Lucas reached for Elena's hand, his small fingers wrapping around hers, and said in accented English, "She made the scary stop, Papa. She was nice." The man's jaw clenched, and Elena saw him swallow hard. He stood slowly, and she realized he was even taller than she'd thought, broad-shouldered and radiating the kind of power that came from years of people doing exactly what he said without question. "How much?" "I don't want." "How much?" His voice could have cut glass. $340, Mr. Chen called from his office, apparently finding his courage now that someone scarier than him was in the room. "Plus, she's fired for policy violation and theft." The man pulled out his wallet, Black leather, thick with cash, and peeled off bills without counting. He handed them to one of his men, who delivered them to Mr. Chen with a look that suggested the pharmacist should be grateful he was only getting money. Then the man turned back to Elena, and she saw him really assess her for the first time. Her cheap shoes, her name badge that said Elena Marsh, Farm D, her hands that were still shaking slightly from adrenaline. "You saved my son's life." "I did my job." "After you were fired for doing it." He tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "Why?" Elena looked down at Lucas, who was breathing normally now, his color good, his eyes bright with the resilience of children who bounce back from near death with remarkable speed. She thought about her mother, about the experimental treatment they couldn't afford, about the pharmaceutical companies that valued profit over human life, about every patient she'd ever watched suffer because their insurance wouldn't cover the medication they needed. "Because some things are more important than rules," she said quietly. "Some things are more important than money. Life is one of those things." The man studied her for a long moment, and Elena had the uncomfortable feeling he was seeing far more than she wanted him to see. The exhaustion, the debt, the desperation she tried to hide under professional competence. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "You will come with us." It wasn't a request. Elena's stomach dropped. "I don't think— You saved my son. I owe you a debt. In my world, debts are paid." He gestured to one of his men who stepped forward. "Victor will ensure you arrive safely. We will discuss compensation for your sacrifice." "I don't want compensation. I just wanted to help him." "Nevertheless." He lifted Lucas into his arms with the careful tenderness of someone who knew exactly how fragile life was, and the boy wrapped his arms around his father's neck, already looking drowsy from the medication and the crash after the adrenaline. "Tomorrow morning, Victor will collect you at 9. "What if I don't want to come?" Those winter storm eyes fixed on her again, and Elena saw something in them that made her breath catch. Not threat, exactly, but certainty. "You will come," he said, and it sounded like prophecy. "Because you want to know that Lucas is well. Because you care what happens to the children you save. Because you are the kind of person who gives away medicine to dying strangers, and that means you will not refuse when I ask to thank you properly." He was right, damn him. Elena did want to know that Lucas was okay, did want to make sure the attack didn't recur, did care in that deep, aching way that had made her choose pharmacy over more lucrative careers because she actually wanted to help people. She nodded slowly, and something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Good. 9 o'clock, Miss Marsh. Don't be late." He turned toward the door, his men falling into formation around him and Lucas, and then he paused and looked back at her. "My name is Dante Volkov. You should know who you're dealing with." The name meant nothing to Elena, but the way Mr. Chen had gone gray at hearing it suggested it should have. The convoy of SUVs pulled away into the Brooklyn night, and Elena stood in the empty pharmacy with her career in ruins and the strangest feeling that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to understand. She gathered her few personal belongings from behind the counter, a photo of her mother, her spare jacket, the coffee mug her pharmacy school roommate had given her that said, "Trust me, I'm a pharmacist," and walked out into the October evening with no job, no prospects, and a growing suspicion that she'd just made either the best or worst decision of her life. The night air was cold against her face as she walked to the subway station, and Elena pulled out her phone to start searching for new job postings, trying not to think about how long it typically took to find pharmacy work, how many bills were due, how quickly her small savings would evaporate. But her fingers typed Dante Volkov into the search bar instead, and what she found made her stop walking entirely, right there on the sidewalk with people flowing around her like water around a stone. Dante Volkov, alleged head of the Volkov crime family, suspected involvement in everything from drug trafficking to money laundering to murder. Never convicted, never even arrested, but his name appeared in dozens of articles about organized crime in New York. The photos showed him at charity galas and business conferences, always in expensive suits, always with that same cold expression, always surrounded by men who looked like they could kill you with their pinky fingers. And in one photo from 2 years ago, she saw him with a woman, beautiful, dark-haired, laughing, and a caption that mentioned his wife Katerina had died in a car accident shortly after the photo was taken. Elena's hands started shaking again, but not from adrenaline this time. She'd saved the son of a Mafia boss. She'd been fired for it. And now she'd agreed to meet with him tomorrow morning, to walk into whatever world he inhabited, to accept whatever compensation he thought appropriate for a life debt. Every survival instinct she'd developed growing up in Brooklyn screamed at her to run, to not show up tomorrow, to disappear into the city's 8 million anonymous faces. But she thought about Lucas's small hand in hers, his trust, his terror, the way he'd called her nice with such simple faith. She thought about Dante Volkov's expression when he'd seen his son struggling to breathe. Not the cold crime boss, but the terrified father. She thought about her mother's voice in her head, the lessons about compassion and courage that had shaped Elena's entire life. Some things were more important than safety. Some things were more important than smart decisions. Sometimes you just had to trust that doing the right thing would lead somewhere worth going, even if the path looked dark and dangerous. Elena pocketed her phone and continued toward the subway, and she didn't look back at the pharmacy where she'd spent 4 years of her life, where she'd made the choice that would change everything. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not, and at 9 o'clock she'd find out exactly what kind of debt a man like Dante Volkov thought he owed. The morning arrived with rain that turned Brooklyn's streets into rivers of gray, and Elena stood in front of her apartment building at 8:55, watching a black SUV idle at the curb with the kind of dread that felt like swallowing stones. She'd barely slept, had spent the night researching Dante Volkov and his organization, had read enough to understand that people who entered his world didn't always come back out. But she'd also thought about Lucas, about his small face going blue, about the terror in his eyes, and she knew she couldn't not show up. She'd made her choice yesterday. Now she had to live with the consequences. Victor emerged from the SUV, tall, broad, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and a scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his jaw. He nodded at her with something that might have been respect. "Miss Marsh, Mr. Volkov is waiting." The interior of the SUV smelled like leather and expensive cologne, and Elena tried not to think about what else might have happened in this vehicle, what other people might have taken this ride and never returned. Victor drove in silence, and she watched the city change outside the windows. Brooklyn giving way to Queens, then crossing into New Jersey, the buildings getting larger and farther apart, the neighborhoods getting progressively wealthier until they were driving through areas where the houses had gates and the lawns looked like golf courses. The Volkov estate appeared through the rain like something from another century. 12-foot walls topped with cameras, a gate that looked like it could stop a tank, and beyond it, a mansion that belonged in a European castle catalog. The house itself was all stone and iron, beautiful and forbidding, with windows that watched like eyes and gardens that probably looked stunning in summer but now appeared skeletal in the October rain. Armed guards were visible at regular intervals, and Elena counted at least 6 cameras just at the entrance. "Jesus," she whispered, and Victor made a sound that might have been amusement. "Mr. Volkov values security, especially now." "Especially now" sounded ominous, but before Elena could ask what he meant, they were pulling up to the main entrance and the massive front doors were opening, and a woman in a severe black dress was waiting with the kind of expression that suggested she'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. Elena followed her inside, her cheap shoes squeaking on marble floors that probably cost more than her entire year's rent, past artwork that she suspected was original and worth more than her student loan debt, through hallways that seemed to go on forever. They stopped at a set of double doors, and the woman knocked once before opening them without waiting for a response. "Miss Marsh, sir." The room beyond was clearly Dante's study. All dark wood and leather, books lining the walls, a massive desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of mahogany, and windows that overlooked gardens where the rain was turning everything to watercolor. Dante stood with his back to the door, looking out at the storm, and he didn't turn immediately. Elena had time to notice that he was dressed more casually than yesterday. Dark slacks, a black sweater that probably cost more than her car, no jacket, and that even in relaxation, he held himself like a man ready for violence. "Thank you for coming," he said without turning around, his voice carrying that same controlled power she remembered from the pharmacy. "I wasn't certain you would. I wanted to know that Lucas was okay." Now he turned, and Elena saw that he looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from a sleepless night spent worrying. "He's well, sleeping now. The attack was severe, but your quick intervention prevented any lasting damage." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." Elena sat because her legs were shaking, and she watched as Dante moved to pour amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. He offered her one, and she took it even though it was barely 9 in the morning, because her hands needed something to hold. The whiskey smelled expensive and burned going down. "I've had my people look into you," Dante said, settling into the chair across from her with the grace of a predator at rest. "Elena Marsh, 29, graduated pharmacy school with honors 4 years ago. 87,000 in student loan debt, most of it from your mother's cancer treatment. No criminal record, no family, no significant relationships. You worked 60-hour weeks at Morrison's Pharmacy and lived in a 400-square-foot studio in Brooklyn. You volunteer at a free clinic on Saturdays and donate 10% of your income to cancer research despite barely making rent." The casual invasion of her privacy should have made Elena angry, but she was too busy being impressed by the thoroughness. "You work fast. I'm thorough about people who enter my son's life." Dante leaned forward slightly, his gray eyes intense. "I need to understand why. You did what you did. You had everything to lose and nothing to gain. You knew you'd be fired. You knew the medication was expensive. You knew the nanny couldn't pay. Yet you helped anyway. Why?" Elena thought about lying, about giving some noble answer about the Hippocratic Oath or professional duty, but something about Dante's gaze suggested he'd see through anything but absolute truth. "My mother had stage 4 lung cancer. For 18 months I watched her suffocate slowly because we couldn't afford the experimental treatment that might have saved her. Every breath was a struggle. Every day was torture. And when she finally died, all I could think was that money had killed her. Not the cancer. Money. The insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the system that decided her life wasn't worth the cost of trying to save it." She took another sip of whiskey, felt it burn away the tears that wanted to form. "When I saw Lucas yesterday, I saw my mother. I saw that same terror, that same desperate struggle for air. And I thought, not again. Not while I have the power to stop it. Not while there's medication right there that could save him. I didn't care about the consequences, I just cared that he lived." Silence filled the study, broken only by the rain against the windows. Dante's expression had shifted into something Elena couldn't quite read. Not pity, exactly, but understanding. Recognition. "You lost everything to save a stranger's child." "I lost a job. Lucas would have lost his life. And now you have no income, no prospects, and debt that will bury you within months." Dante set down his glass with careful precision. "I told you I pay my debts, Miss Marsh. I have a proposition for you." Elena's stomach tightened. "I don't want money for saving Lucas. That's not why I did it." "I know, which is why I'm not offering you money." Dante stood and moved to the windows, his back to her again, and Elena had the sense he found it easier to say difficult things without eye contact. Lucas has severe asthma triggered by stress and anxiety. Since his mother died 18 months ago, he's had 17 major attacks. We've tried 6 different caregivers, all of them highly qualified medical professionals. The longest any of them lasted was 3 weeks. Lucas is difficult. He's grieving, he's angry, he doesn't trust easily, and he certainly doesn't trust people his father hires to care for him. Dante turned back to face her, and Elena saw something raw in his expression. But yesterday, when you helped him, something changed. He trusted you. He reached for you. He called you nice, like it was the highest compliment he could give. And last night, when he woke from a nightmare, he asked for you. Not me, not his nanny. You. I don't understand what you're asking. I'm asking you to be Lucas's full-time caregiver, to live here, in this house, and provide him with medical oversight and companionship, to help him heal from losing his mother, to give him stability and someone he can trust. Dante named a figure that made Elena's jaw drop, $50,000 a month, plus room and board, plus medical insurance, plus a signing bonus that would eliminate her student loan debt entirely. That's insane, Elena said faintly. I'm not a nanny. I'm not a therapist. I'm a pharmacist. You're someone my son trusts. You're someone who risked everything to save him without expecting anything in return. You're someone who understands loss and grief and what it means to struggle for breath. Dante moved closer, and Elena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I'm not asking you to be a nanny. I'm asking you to be the person who helps my son learn to live again. And if I say no, then you leave here with a check for $10,000 and my gratitude, and you never see us again. You find another job, struggle with your debt, and eventually claw your way back to stability. His voice softened slightly. Or you stay, and you give Lucas what he needs most, someone who genuinely cares whether he lives or dies, someone who doesn't see him as a paycheck or an obligation, someone who sees him as a child worth saving. Elena looked around the study, at the wealth and power on display, at the man who commanded criminal empires and inspired fear in everyone who knew his name. She thought about her tiny apartment, her student loans, her ruined career, her complete lack of options. She thought about Lucas's small hand in hers, his trust, his terror. She thought about her mother's voice teaching her that courage meant doing the right thing even when it cost you everything. I need to think about it, she said, because agreeing immediately felt like surrendering too much control. Dante nodded as if he'd expected nothing less. Victor will show you to a guest room. Take the day. Explore the house. Meet Lucas when he wakes. Make your decision with full information. He moved to his desk and pulled out a folder, sliding it across to her. Everything about my offer is in writing. Read it carefully. Ask questions. I want you to choose this with open eyes. Elena took the folder with hands that trembled slightly, and she let Victor escort her through the mansion to a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment, with windows overlooking the gardens and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and Elena noticed that while there was no lock on her side, there was definitely security on the other. She wasn't a prisoner exactly, but she wasn't free to leave either. She spent an hour reading through the contract, pages and pages of legal language that essentially said she'd be responsible for Lucas's medical care, emotional well-being, and daily activities, that she'd live on the estate with her own suite of rooms, that she'd be compensated generously and given complete access to whatever resources Lucas needed. There were confidentiality clauses, security protocols, emergency procedures, and a termination clause that said either party could end the arrangement with 2 weeks' notice. It was professional, thorough, and completely surreal. Elena kept reading phrases like, in the event of hostile action, and security lockdown procedures, and armed escort requirements, and realizing that this wasn't just a caregiver position. This was entering a world where violence was always a possibility, where Lucas needed protection as much as he needed medical care, where the money being offered was partly hazard pay for the danger of being associated with the Volkov name. A soft knock interrupted her reading, and the door opened to reveal a small face peering around the edge. Lucas, looking shy and uncertain, wearing pajamas covered in dinosaurs and holding an inhaler like a security blanket. "Are you the nice lady from yesterday?" Elena's heart melted. "I am. My name is Elena. How are you feeling today, Lucas?" "Better." He crept into the room, his bare feet silent on the plush carpet. "Papa said you might stay and help me not be scared of the breathing monster." "The breathing monster?" Lucas nodded solemnly. "That's what it feels like when I can't breathe. Like a monster sitting on my chest and stealing my air. Mama used to make it go away, but now she's gone and the monster comes more." Elena set aside the contract and knelt down to his level, remembering her training in pediatric psychology from pharmacy school. "That sounds really scary. The monster has a name, though. It's called asthma. And while we can't make it go away completely, we can teach it to behave better. Would you like to learn how?" "You can teach monsters to behave?" "Some of them. The breathing monster is actually not trying to hurt you. It's just confused. Your lungs are trying to protect you from things that aren't really dangerous, and they get a little too excited about it. But we can show them how to calm down." Lucas considered this with the seriousness of a child who'd spent too much time being scared. "Will you stay and teach me? Papa says you're really smart about medicine and you saved my life yesterday." "I helped you yesterday," Elena corrected gently. "But you were brave too. You listened to me and did what I asked, even though you were scared. That took courage. Mama said brave people feel scared but do things anyway." Lucas's eyes filled with tears. "Are you brave?" The question hit Elena like a physical blow. Was she brave? Or was she just desperate, out of options, willing to take a dangerous offer because she had nothing left to lose? But looking at Lucas's hopeful face, his trust, his need, she realized that bravery wasn't about not being afraid. It was about choosing to help anyway. "I'm terrified," Elena admitted. "Your house is huge and fancy, and I don't know how to live here. Your papa is intimidating. The whole situation is scary. But you know what? That means we can be brave together. What do you think?" Lucas's face lit up with the first real smile she'd seen from him, and he reached for her hand. "Together. Like a team." "Like a team," Elena agreed, and she felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty, exactly, but commitment. She couldn't walk away from this child, couldn't leave him alone with his grief and fear, couldn't abandon him to another parade of caregivers who saw him as a problem to manage rather than a person to help. She'd made her choice yesterday when she'd broken that seal on the inhaler. Everything since then had just been accepting the consequences. "Okay, Lucas, I'll stay. But I need you to help me with something. I need you to show me around this giant house so I don't get lost. Can you do that?" Lucas nodded enthusiastically and pulled her toward the door, chattering about the library and the game room and the kitchen where the cook made the best cookies in the world. Elena let herself be led through the mansion's endless corridors, and she tried not to think about the armed guards she passed, the cameras in every corner, the sense that she was descending deeper into a world she didn't fully understand. They found Dante in what Lucas called the family room, a space that was somehow both luxurious and comfortable, with overstuffed couches and a fireplace and windows that let in the gray morning light. He looked up from his laptop as they entered, and Elena saw his expression shift when he noticed Lucas holding her hand, saw something like relief cross his features. "Papa, Elena's staying. She's going to teach the breathing monster to behave." Dante's gaze met Elena's over his son's head, and she saw the question there. She nodded once and watched him close his eyes briefly, his shoulders dropping as if releasing tension he'd been carrying for months. "I'm glad," he said simply. "Thank you, Miss Marsh." "Elena," she corrected. "If I'm going to be living here, We should probably use first names. Elena, then. He stood and moved closer, and Elena was struck again by how tall he was, how much presence he commanded even in casual clothes, how his eyes seemed to see everything. Lucas, why don't you show Elena the gardens? I believe the rain has stopped. Lucas bounded off toward what Elena assumed was the garden exit, and she moved to follow, but Dante's hand on her arm stopped her. His touch was gentle but unmistakable, and Elena looked up at him with her pulse suddenly racing. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I know you're afraid. I know this world is dangerous and unfamiliar. But you're giving my son something I can't. Hope. That's worth more than any amount of money I could offer you." "I'm not doing this for the money," Elena said. "I'm doing it because Lucas asked me to stay, and I couldn't say no to him." Something flickered in Dante's eyes. Approval, maybe, or recognition. "That's why you're the right person for this." He released her arm and stepped back, the professional distance returning. "Victor will help you move your belongings this afternoon. If you need anything at all, you ask. Lucas's well-being is my priority. Your safety and comfort are part of that." Elena nodded and followed Lucas's excited voice toward the gardens, and she tried to ignore the feeling that she'd just signed a contract written in something more permanent than ink. The rain had indeed stopped, leaving the gardens glistening and fresh, and Lucas dragged her from flowerbed to fountain to what he called his secret spot, a bench hidden behind overgrown roses where he said his mother used to read to him. "Do you like to read?" Lucas asked, settling onto the bench with the ease of someone who'd spent many hours there. "I love to read. What kind of stories do you like?" "Adventure stories, where people are brave and go on quests and defeat monsters." He looked at her seriously. "Do you think we could read some together?" "Papa tries, but he's always busy with work, and the nannies never wanted to sit still long enough." "I think reading together sounds perfect. We could make it part of your routine, maybe before bed. Stories can help you relax, and relaxation helps with the breathing monster." Lucas's face lit up again, and Elena felt something warm spread through her chest. This was why she'd become a pharmacist. Not for the prestige or the money, but for moments like this, where she could actually help someone, where her knowledge and compassion made a real difference. She'd lost that feeling at Morrison's, buried under corporate policies and insurance battles and Mr. Chen's focus on profit margins. But here, with Lucas, she could remember why she'd chosen this path in the first place. They spent the afternoon exploring the estate, and Elena tried not to be overwhelmed by the sheer scale of wealth on display. There was an indoor pool, a full gym, a library that made her want to weep with joy, a game room with every console imaginable, and a medical suite that was better equipped than most urgent care clinics. Lucas showed her everything with pride, and Elena noticed how he carefully avoided certain rooms: the master bedroom where his parents had slept, his mother's study, the nursery that had been prepared for a sibling who would never arrive. By evening, Elena's few belongings had been moved into a suite of rooms that felt obscenely luxurious: a bedroom, a sitting room, a private bathroom with a tub large enough to swim in, and a small office space. Her clothes looked ridiculous in the massive closet, her few books pathetic on the built-in shelves, her toiletries lost in the expanse of marble and chrome. She stood in the middle of it all and felt the reality crash over her. This was her life now. This mansion, this child, this dangerous man, and his dangerous world. A knock on her door revealed Dante, changed, into a suit for what Elena assumed was evening business, looking every inch the crime boss rather than the worried father. "Lucas is asking for you. He wants you to read to him before bed." Elena followed him to Lucas's room, a child's paradise of toys and books and comfortable furniture, with nightlights that projected stars on the ceiling and a bed that looked like a race car. Lucas was already in pajamas, clutching a book about dragons, and his face lit up when he saw Elena. "You came." "Of course I came. We're a team, remember?" Elena settled onto the edge of his bed and took the book, aware of Dante standing in the doorway, watching them. She began to read, using different voices for different characters, and Lucas giggled at her dragon impression. Halfway through the story, he yawned and snuggled closer to her side, and Elena felt her heart clench. This child had lost his mother, had spent 18 months grieving and scared, and somehow he was still capable of trust, still capable of laughter, still capable of hope. By the time she finished the story, Lucas was drowsy, his breathing even and peaceful. Elena tucked him in, made sure his emergency inhaler was on the nightstand, and turned on the star projector. "Sleep well, brave boy. I'll be right down the hall if you need me." "Promise?" "Promise." She left the door cracked open and found Dante still in the hallway, his expression unreadable. They walked in silence back toward her suite, and Elena was acutely aware of how alone they were, how quiet the mansion was, how dangerous this man was supposed to be. But when he spoke, his voice was soft. He hasn't laughed like that since Katerina died. He hasn't asked for bedtime stories. He hasn't. Dante paused, and Elena saw him struggle with emotion. "Thank you. For seeing him as a child who deserves joy, not a tragedy that needs management." "He is a child who deserves joy," Elena said firmly. "He's been through hell, but he's still in there, the happy, curious, brave little boy he was before. He just needs someone to help him find his way back." "And you think you can do that?" "I think I can try. I think he deserves someone who'll try." Elena met Dante's gaze directly. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not going to tiptoe around his grief or pretend his mother never existed. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry the loss without letting it crush you." Dante's expression shifted into something Elena couldn't quite read. "You speak from experience. I lost my mother less than 2 years ago. I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning in grief, to feel like you'll never breathe normally again. But I also know that eventually the waves get smaller. The pain becomes bearable. You learn to remember the love without being destroyed by the loss." Elena's voice softened. "Lucas needs to know it's okay to miss his mother. It's okay to be sad, but it's also okay to laugh again, to be happy again, to let new people into his heart. Those things don't dishonor her memory. They honor it by showing that her love made him strong enough to survive losing her." Silence stretched between them, and Elena saw Dante's throat work as he swallowed hard. "I should have said that to him months ago. I should have known how to help him. But every time I try, I see Katerina's face, and He stopped, turned away. "I'm not good at this, at feelings, at being what he needs. You're his father. You're exactly what he needs. You just need to let yourself be human with him, not just the protector." Elena surprised herself by reaching out and touching Dante's arm. "He doesn't need you to be perfect. He needs you to be present." Dante looked down at her hand on his arm, and Elena saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, that she'd touched him voluntarily, that she wasn't afraid. "You're braver than you think," he said quietly. "Most people won't even look me in the eye. You lecture me about parenting. You hired me to help Lucas. That includes helping you help him." Elena withdrew her hand, suddenly aware of how intimate the moment had become. "I should get some sleep. Tomorrow I want to review Lucas's medical history and current medication regimen, make sure we're managing his asthma optimally." Dante nodded and stepped back, the professional distance returning like a shield. "Good night, Elena, and thank you, again." Elena retreated to her suite and closed the door, leaning against it as she tried to process everything that had happened in the last 36 hours. She'd gone from fired pharmacist to live-in caregiver for a Mafia boss's son. She'd gone from a tiny studio to a mansion that probably had more square footage than her entire apartment building. She'd gone from drowning in debt to financial security that felt surreal. But more than that, she'd found purpose again. She'd found a child who needed her, who trusted her, who gave her a reason to get up in the morning beyond just surviving. She'd found work that mattered, that used her skills and her compassion, that made a real difference in someone's life. She just hoped she survived long enough to see Lucas heal. The thought came unbidden, unwelcome, as Elena changed into pajamas and climbed into a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. This world Dante inhabited, the guards, the cameras, the casual mentions of security protocols, suggested that danger was always present, always lurking. She'd entered that world voluntarily, had chosen to tie her fate to Lucas's, and, by extension, to Dante's. Elena stared at the ceiling, at the play of moonlight through expensive curtains, and wondered what her mother would think of this choice. Would she be proud that Elena was helping a grieving child? Or would she be horrified that her daughter had accepted employment from a criminal? But then Elena thought about her mother's lessons, about compassion, about courage, about doing what was right even when it cost you everything. Her mother had taught her that people were more than their worst choices, that everyone deserved a chance at redemption, that love was the most powerful force in the universe. Lucas deserved someone who would love him enough to help him heal. Dante deserved someone who would see past the crime boss to the grieving widower trying desperately to save his son. And Elena deserved a chance to use her gifts to make a real difference, to honor her mother's memory by being the kind of person who helped others without counting the cost. She fell asleep with that thought, and she dreamed of her mother's smile, of Lucas's laughter, of Dante's gray eyes softening with something that looked like hope. And when she woke in the middle of the night to the sound of small footsteps in the hallway, she didn't hesitate before opening her door to find Lucas standing there, clutching his inhaler, breathing fast, but not dangerously so. "Bad dream?" Elena asked softly, and Lucas nodded, tears streaming down his face. She didn't ask permission, didn't think about protocol. She just opened her arms, and Lucas flew into them, sobbing against her shoulder. "It's okay. I've got you. You're safe." "I dreamed the breathing monster took you away like it took Mama," Lucas hiccuped. "I dreamed you left, and I was alone again." Elena's heart shattered. She carried Lucas to her bed, settled him against the pillows, and lay down beside him, one arm around his small body. "I'm not going anywhere. I promised. Remember? We're a team. The bravest team. Together? Together." Lucas's breathing gradually calmed, his body relaxing against hers, and Elena found herself humming the same lullaby her mother had sung to her, a wordless melody that spoke of safety and love and home. She felt Lucas's grip on her loosen as he fell asleep, and she let herself drift off too, thinking that this moment of comfort, this act of simple human kindness, was worth any amount of danger, any amount of fear, any amount of uncertainty about the future. In the doorway, unseen by either of them, Dante stood watching his son sleep peacefully for the first time in months, watching this woman who'd entered their lives like a miracle hold Lucas with the tenderness of a mother, and he felt something shift in his chest. Something that felt dangerously like hope, something that felt impossibly like the beginning of healing. He retreated to his study and poured himself whiskey that tasted like guilt and gratitude, and he made a silent vow that he would protect them both, Lucas and Elena, with everything he had, every resource at his disposal, every ounce of power he'd accumulated. They were his responsibility now, his family, his to keep safe, even if it meant going to war with the entire world. The weeks that followed established a rhythm that felt almost normal, if you ignored the armed guards and the security cameras and the casual mentions of business that Elena learned not to ask about. She woke early, checked on Lucas, and spent mornings working on his medical care, optimizing his medication schedule, teaching him breathing exercises, helping him understand his triggers and how to manage them. She'd reduced his daily attacks by 60% within the first 3 weeks, and watching his confidence grow as he gained control over his condition filled her with a satisfaction that no paycheck could match. Afternoons were for education and play. Elena wasn't technically his teacher, but she helped with homework and turned everything into learning opportunities. They did science experiments in the kitchen that made the cook nervous and delighted Lucas. They read books about everything from dinosaurs to space exploration. They played games that taught strategy and problem-solving. And slowly, carefully, Elena introduced conversations about Katerina, looking at photo albums, sharing memories, helping Lucas understand that loving his mother and moving forward weren't mutually exclusive. The staff watched her with initial suspicion that gradually transformed into respect. Victor, in particular, seemed to approve of her no-nonsense approach to both Lucas's care and the security protocols. He taught her how to recognize threats, how to use the panic buttons hidden throughout the house, how to protect Lucas if they were ever separated during an emergency. Elena tried not to think too hard about why these skills might be necessary. Dante remained mostly in the background, a presence more than a participant. But Elena noticed how he watched them during family dinners, the only time he insisted on being present. She noticed how his expression softened when Lucas laughed, how his hands clenched when Lucas mentioned his mother, how his eyes tracked Elena's movements with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. She noticed other things, too. The way Dante was gentle with Lucas despite his reputation for violence. The way he read business reports with the same focus most people reserved for holy texts. The way his rare smiles transformed his face from intimidating to devastatingly handsome. The way he smelled like expensive cologne and danger, and something uniquely him that made Elena's pulse quicken whenever he stood too close. She told herself it was just proximity, just gratitude, just the natural result of living in close quarters with an objectively attractive man. She told herself she was here for Lucas, not for the way Dante's voice made her stomach flip, not for the moments when their eyes met across the dinner table and something electric passed between them. She told herself a lot of things that became harder to believe with each passing day. The breakthrough came during a thunderstorm in late October, 3 weeks after Elena had moved into the estate. Thunder was one of Lucas's worst triggers. He'd been in the car with his mother when the bomb exploded, and loud noises sent him spiraling into panic attacks that could quickly become full asthma attacks. Elena had been working with him on coping strategies, but theory was different from practice, and when the first crack of thunder shook the house, she heard Lucas's scream from down the hall. She found him in his closet, the same closet where he'd hidden the day his mother died, hyperventilating and clawing at his throat. His inhaler lay forgotten on the floor, and Elena's training warred with her instinct. The medical professional wanted to medicate him immediately, but the human who understood grief knew that sometimes fear needed to be faced, not medicated away. "Lucas," she said softly, crawling into the closet beside him, making herself small and non-threatening. "Hey, brave boy, I'm here." "Can't breathe. Monster." "I know, the monster's being loud today because the thunder scared it, but we're going to show it that we're braver than thunder, okay?" Elena positioned herself so Lucas could see her face, and she exaggerated her breathing. Slow inhale through the nose, even slower exhale through the mouth. "Breathe with me," just like we practiced. Lucas tried, failed, tried again. His eyes were wild with panic, and Elena made a split-second decision. "You know what? The thunder is scary. I'm scared too. Want to know a secret?" Lucas nodded, his breathing still rapid but slowing slightly as curiosity penetrated the panic. "When I was little and there were thunderstorms, my mommy would make a blanket fort with me. She'd say that forts were magic. They kept out all the scary things and let in only the good things. Should we make this closet into a fort? Forts are magic?" Lucas's voice was small, doubtful, but interested. "The best magic, the kind that comes from love and bravery and being together." Elena grabbed blankets from Lucas's bed and draped them over the closet rod, creating a canopy. She found his flashlight and turned it on, casting soft light in their cocoon. "There. Now this is Fort Brave, and you know what happens in Fort Brave?" What? We tell stories about brave people, like your mama. Tell me something brave your mama did. Lucas's breathing was almost normal now, his panic receding as his mind focused on memory instead of fear. Mama wasn't scared of anything. She used to catch spiders and put them outside instead of killing them. She said they were just small and scared and needed someone to be brave for them. That is brave. Being kind when you could be afraid, that's the bravest thing of all. Another crack of thunder, but this time Lucas only flinched. Elena kept talking. You know what else is brave? Letting yourself be scared and doing things anyway. Like you're doing right now. You're scared of the thunder, but you're sitting here with me, breathing, talking, being brave even though it's hard. Am I really being brave? The bravest. You know how I know? Elena touched his chest lightly over his heart. Because brave people feel scared but do things anyway. That's what your mama taught you, right? Lucas nodded, and then something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe, or acceptance. You're scared too? Of the thunder? I'm terrified, Elena admitted. Your house is huge and I'm still getting lost. The thunder is loud. Everything feels big and scary. But you know what makes it less scary? What? Having a teammate, having someone to be brave with. Elena held out her hand and Lucas took it, his small fingers wrapping around hers with trust that made her throat tight. So, what do you say? Want to be brave together? Together, Lucas agreed. And then he did something that made Elena's heart stop. He leaned against her shoulder and said, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad the breathing monster made you come save me, because now I have you. Elena wrapped her arm around him and felt tears slip down her cheeks. I'm glad too, sweetheart. I'm so glad. They sat in Fort Brave until the storm passed, and Elena told Lucas stories about her mother, about her bravery during her illness, about her kindness, about how love didn't end just because someone died. She told him about grief, about how it came in waves, about how some days were harder than others, about how it was okay to be sad and okay to be happy, sometimes in the same moment. Lucas listened with the intensity of a child who desperately needed to hear that his feelings were normal, that his grief was valid, that he wasn't broken or wrong for still missing his mother. And when he finally fell asleep against Elena's shoulder, exhausted from the emotional storm that had been more draining than the weather, she carefully carried him to his bed and tucked him in. She found Dante standing in the hallway, and from his expression he'd been there for a while. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw tight with emotion, and when he spoke, his voice was rough. I've been trying to help him for 18 months. Therapists, medications, everything I could think of. And you... He stopped, swallowed hard. You crawled into a closet with him and made it magic. I just reminded him that he's not alone, Elena said softly. That being scared is okay. That his mother's love made him strong enough to survive losing her. Dante's hand came up as if to touch her face, then dropped. You're remarkable. The way you see him. Not as a patient or a problem, but as a person who deserves joy. I don't... He struggled with the words. I don't know how to thank you for giving him that. You don't have to thank me. Lucas is easy to love. Something flickered in Dante's eyes at the word love, and Elena realized what she'd said, how much she'd revealed. She'd fallen in love with Lucas, with his bravery, his curiosity, his resilient heart. She'd fallen in love with being his caregiver, his protector, his chosen family. And somewhere along the way, without meaning to, without wanting to, she'd started falling for his father too. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt inevitable. I should check on him one more time, Elena said, needing distance before she did something stupid like admit her feelings. Make sure the storm didn't trigger any respiratory issues. Elena. Dante's voice stopped her. What you said in there, about love not ending when someone dies. Did you mean that? Every word. Then, He paused, and Elena saw him gather courage. Then maybe it's possible to love again. After loss, maybe it's not a betrayal. Elena understood what he was really asking. If it was okay for him to move forward, to feel things for someone new, to let himself be happy again without dishonoring Katerina's memory. "It's not a betrayal," she said gently. "It's proof that Katerina loved you so well that you're capable of loving again. That's a gift, not a betrayal." Dante's expression cracked, and for a moment Elena saw past the crime boss to the man underneath. Grieving, lonely, desperate for permission to feel something other than guilt. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." Elena nodded and escaped to Lucas's room, her heart pounding, her mind racing. This was dangerous territory, developing feelings for her employer, for a man whose world was built on violence, for someone who could never offer her a normal life. She needed to be professional, needed to maintain boundaries, needed to remember why she was here. But when she checked on Lucas and found him sleeping peacefully, his breathing even and unlabored, his face relaxed in a way she'd never seen before, she knew it was too late for boundaries. She was already in too deep, already emotionally invested, already part of this family in ways that went far beyond her job description. She just had to figure out how to survive it. The days that followed the storm felt different, charged with something Elena couldn't quite name. Dante was around more, joining them for breakfast, working from the family room instead of his study, finding excuses to be present. Lucas bloomed under the attention, his confidence growing, his attacks becoming rarer. And Elena found herself hyper-aware of Dante's presence, the way he watched her with Lucas, the way his rare smiles seemed to be appearing more frequently, the way he'd started asking her opinion on things beyond just Lucas's care. "What do you think about this?" he'd ask, showing her plans for a new playground in the gardens. "Is this appropriate for his age?" Or, "Lucas mentioned wanting to learn piano. Do you think he's ready for that kind of structured learning?" Or, "I'm considering reducing my travel schedule. Would it help Lucas to have more consistency in his routine?" Elena answered honestly, and she noticed how Dante actually listened, actually implemented her suggestions, actually valued her input, in a way that made her feel like a partner rather than an employee. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. 4 weeks became 5, and Elena stopped counting days until she could leave. She stopped thinking about her old life, her old apartment, her old career. This was her life now. Lucas's laughter, Dante's rare smiles, the strange comfort of armed guards and security protocols. She'd adapted to the wealth, learned to navigate the mansion without getting lost, become comfortable with the staff. She'd become comfortable. Period. And that should have been her first warning that something was about to shatter the peace. Victor found her in the library one afternoon while Lucas was at his piano lesson, his expression grim. "We need to talk. Security situation." Elena's stomach dropped. She'd known this was coming eventually. You didn't live in a crime boss's house without eventually facing the reality of what that meant. "What kind of situation?" "The Marino family. They've been quiet since the territory dispute 2 years ago, but our intelligence suggests they're planning something. They know about Lucas. They know about you." Victor's scarred face was grave. "You're a target now, Elena. Both of you are." "Target for what?" "Leverage. Dante won the shipping contracts they wanted. They lost money, territory, respect. They want revenge, and the best way to hurt Dante is through his son. And now, through you." Elena felt ice flood her veins. How serious is the threat? Serious enough that we're implementing additional protocols, armed escorts at all times, no outdoor activities, restricted access to certain areas of the house, and we need to prepare you for emergency situations. Victor's voice softened slightly. "I know this isn't what you signed up for. If you want to leave, Dante will arrange safe relocation. You'd be protected, compensated, free to go." The offer hung in the air, tempting and terrifying. Elena could leave, could escape this dangerous world, could return to normalcy and safety and a life where she didn't have to worry about crime families and revenge plots. She could walk away from Lucas, from Dante, from the family she'd started to build here. She could, but she wouldn't. "I'm staying," Elena said firmly. "Lucas needs stability, not another person abandoning him when things get dangerous. That's me. I'm the stability." Victor studied her for a long moment, then nodded with something that looked like respect. "Dante said you'd say that. He also said to tell you that if anything happens, your safety is the priority. Not his, not the business, yours and Lucas's." "Nothing's going to happen," Elena said with more confidence than she felt. "You're the best security team I've ever seen. We'll be fine." But that night, as Elena lay in bed listening to the increased guard rotations outside her window, she wondered if she'd just made the bravest or stupidest decision of her life. She'd chosen to stay in danger, chosen to tie her fate to a child and a man who lived under constant threat, chosen love and loyalty over safety and sense. Her mother would have been proud, or horrified, possibly both. Elena was drifting off to sleep when she heard her door open softly, and she tensed until she recognized Dante's silhouette. "Is Lucas okay?" "He's fine. Sleeping." Dante moved closer, and in the moonlight filtering through her windows, Elena could see the tension in his shoulders, the worry in his eyes. "I needed to see that you were okay. Victor told you about the Marinos." "He did. I'm staying." "You shouldn't. It's too dangerous. I can't—" Dante's voice cracked. "I can't lose anyone else. I can't lose you." The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning, and Elena sat up, pulling the covers around herself. "You're not going to lose me. I'm not going anywhere. You don't understand what these people are capable of, what they'll do to get to me." Dante sat on the edge of her bed, his weight making the mattress dip, and Elena could feel the heat of him even through the blankets. "Katerina died because of my world, because I wasn't careful enough, wasn't thorough enough, didn't see the threat until it was too late. I can't make that mistake again." "Then don't," Elena said simply. "Be thorough. Be careful. Use every resource you have. But don't ask me to leave Lucas when he needs me most. Don't ask me to abandon this family." "This family," Dante repeated, and his hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "When did you start thinking of us as family?" "I don't know. Somewhere between the closet fort and the piano lessons and the way Lucas looks at me like I hung the moon." Elena leaned into his touch, unable to help herself. "Somewhere between watching you read him bedtime stories and seeing you smile at his terrible jokes and realizing that you're not the monster everyone thinks you are." "I am a monster, Elena. I've done terrible things. I'll do more terrible things to keep you and Lucas safe." "Then be my monster," Elena whispered, and she watched Dante's eyes widen with shock. "Be the monster who protects us. Be the father who loves his son. Be the man who reads bedtime stories and makes terrible coffee and looks at me like I'm something precious. Be all of those things because that's who you really are." Dante's control shattered. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her lips. "You see too much. You see things I don't want anyone to see." "I see you," Elena said, "the real you, and I'm not afraid. You should be, but I'm not." The kiss was inevitable, had been building since the moment Elena had saved Lucas, since the first time their eyes had met across a dinner table, since every shared moment of watching Lucas heal. Dante's lips were soft and desperate, his hand sliding into her hair, and Elena kissed him back with all the feelings she'd been trying to deny, the attraction, the affection, the deep and terrifying realization that she was falling in love with him. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dante's eyes were dark with emotion. This is a terrible idea. Probably the worst. I'm dangerous. My world is dangerous. You deserve better. I deserve to choose, Elena corrected. And I choose this. I choose you. I choose Lucas. I choose this family, with all its danger and complications and absolute insanity. Dante kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, and Elena felt herself falling into it, into him, into the impossible reality that she'd found love in the most unlikely place. When he pulled back, he was smiling. A real smile, soft and genuine and transformative. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. But I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. Elena touched his face, feeling the stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. We're in this together now, all three of us. Together, Dante agreed, and he kissed her forehead before standing reluctantly. I should go. If I stay, I won't want to leave, and Lucas might come looking for you again. Dante? Elena called as he reached the door. Thank you for trusting me with Lucas, for trusting me with yourself. Thank you for staying, for choosing us, for being brave enough to love a monster. He left, and Elena lay back in her bed with her heart racing and her mind spinning. She'd just kissed her employer. She'd just admitted feelings for a crime boss. She'd just committed herself to a future that was uncertain at best and deadly at worst. And she didn't regret a single second of it. The next morning brought increased security that was impossible to ignore. Armed guards stationed at every entrance, cameras in every corridor, restrictions on where Elena and Lucas could go within the estate. Victor conducted emergency drills, teaching them evacuation routes, safe room locations, code words that meant immediate danger. Lucas took it all with the seriousness of a child who understood that his father's world was dangerous, and Elena tried not to let her fear show. But she was afraid. Not for herself, but for Lucas, for the innocent child who'd already lost his mother and didn't deserve to lose anyone else. She found herself checking on him constantly, hovering more than she should, and Lucas noticed. You're worried, he said during their afternoon reading session. Like Papa gets worried. Just being careful, Elena said, trying to smile. Making sure you're safe. Because of the bad people who don't like Papa? Elena hesitated, unsure how much Lucas understood, how much he should understand. Yes. But that's why we have Victor and all the guards. They're very good at keeping us safe. Will the bad people try to hurt me? Like they hurt Mama? The question was asked with such calm directness that Elena's heart broke. Your father and Victor and everyone here are making sure that doesn't happen, and I'm here too. I won't let anything happen to you. Promise? Elena knew she shouldn't make promises she might not be able to keep, but looking at Lucas's trusting face, she couldn't help herself. Promise. We're a team, remember? The bravest team, and teams protect each other. Lucas seemed satisfied with that answer, and they returned to their book. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something dark and dangerous that would test every promise she'd just made. The feeling proved prophetic when Victor pulled her aside 3 days later, his expression grimmer than she'd ever seen. We've intercepted communications. The Marinos are planning to move within the week. They know Lucas's schedule, his routines. They know about you. What's the plan? Lockdown. No one in or out except essential personnel. Dante's handling the threat from his end, but until it's resolved, you and Lucas stay in the secure wing. Victor handed her a small device. Panic button. If anything happens, anything, you press this and the entire security team responds. You protect Lucas first, yourself second. Understood? Elena nodded, her mouth dry. Understood. That night, Dante found her in the library after Lucas was asleep, and without a word, he pulled her into his arms. Elena went willingly, bearing her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, letting herself be held. I'm scared, she admitted, Not for me. For Lucas. For you. I know. I'm scared too. Dante's arms tightened around her. But I've dealt with threats like this before. The Merinos are desperate, which makes them dangerous but also predictable. We'll end this. How? However I have to. His voice was cold, and Elena heard the crime boss in it. The man capable of violence and ruthlessness. They threatened my son. They threatened you. That's unforgivable. Elena pulled back to look at his face, at the cold fury there, and she understood that Dante would do terrible things to protect them. Part of her should have been horrified. Instead, she felt safe, protected, loved. Just come back, she said. Whatever you have to do, just come back to us. Dante kissed her, soft and sweet and desperate, and Elena kissed him back like it might be the last time, like she could pour all her feelings into this moment and make them count. When they separated, Dante rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said, the words raw and honest. I didn't want to. I tried not to. But you made it impossible not to love you. Elena's breath caught. I love you too. Both of you. This family. This life. All of it. Even the danger? Even the danger. Because it comes with you. They stood there in the library holding each other, and Elena tried to memorize this moment. The feel of his arms around her. The sound of his heartbeat. The warmth of his body against hers. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, they had this. The attack came on a Thursday afternoon, during Lucas's tutoring session in the sunroom. Elena was helping him with a math problem when she heard the explosion. Distant but unmistakable, the sound of something breaching the estate's perimeter. The alarms started immediately, loud and insistent, and Elena's training took over. Lucas, come with me, now. She grabbed his hand and ran for the panic room Victor had shown her, but the corridor was already filling with smoke, and she could hear gunfire, sharp cracks that made her ears ring. She pivoted toward the kitchen instead, remembering the secondary exit. Her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Lucas was crying, but keeping up, his small hand tight in hers, and Elena sent up a prayer to whatever God might be listening that she could get him to safety. They burst into the kitchen just as a man in black tactical gear came through the opposite door, his weapon raised, his eyes cold and professional. Elena didn't think. She grabbed the nearest object, a cast-iron pan, and charged him, putting herself between the gun and Lucas. "Run!" she screamed, and Lucas scrambled toward the refrigerator alcove she'd noticed during their kitchen science experiments. The man fired. Pain exploded in Elena's shoulder, white-hot and devastating, but adrenaline kept her moving. She swung the pan with all her strength, connected with the side of his head, and he went down hard. One of Dante's guards appeared, finished the threat, and Elena stumbled toward Lucas, blood soaking through her shirt. "Elena!" Lucas's scream was pure terror, and Elena forced herself to stay conscious, to stay functional, to protect him like she'd promised. "I'm okay, brave boy. I'm okay." She wasn't okay. She could feel blood loss making her dizzy, could feel her body starting to shut down. But she pressed her hand against the wound and used her body to shield Lucas in the alcove. "Stay down. Stay quiet. I've got you." The gunfire continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Elena kept pressure on her wound, kept her body between Lucas and danger, kept whispering reassurances even as black spots danced in her vision. She thought about Dante, hoped he was safe, hoped he would forgive her if she didn't survive this. She thought about her mother, about courage and compassion and doing the right thing even when it cost everything. She thought about Lucas, about his trust, about his love, about how he deserved so much better than a world where people tried to kill him for leverage. And then Dante was there, appearing in the kitchen doorway like an avenging angel, his suit covered in blood that Elena hoped wasn't his face a mask of cold fury that shattered the moment he saw them. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, dropped to his knees beside them, and the sound that came out of him was inhuman. "Elena." Elena, look at me." His hands were on her face, her shoulders assessing the damage, and Elena saw terror in his eyes. "Stay with me. Don't you dare leave us." "Lucas," Elena managed. "Is he?" "I'm here, Elena." Lucas was crying, his small hands clutching her uninjured arm. "Don't go away like Mama, please. Don't go away." "Not going anywhere," Elena promised, even though keeping that promise was getting harder with every second. "Just need a minute." "Medic!" Dante's voice could have shattered stone. "Get the medic here now." Elena felt herself being lifted, felt Dante's arms around her, heard his voice in her ear telling her to stay awake, to keep breathing, to hold on. She tried. She really tried. But the darkness was so tempting, and she was so tired, and the pain was becoming distant and manageable in a way that she knew meant bad things. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness took her was Lucas's voice. You promised you wouldn't leave." And Elena thought with her last conscious thought that she was sorry for breaking that promise, even if it was to save his life. She woke to white ceiling tiles and the smell of antiseptic, and for a confused moment she thought she was back in the hospital where her mother had died. Panic seized her until she heard a familiar voice. "Easy, you're safe. You're in the estate's medical wing." Elena turned her head, carefully because everything hurt, and found Dante sitting beside her bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His clothes were clean now, but his face was haggard, his eyes red-rimmed, and when he saw her looking at him, something broke in his expression. "You took a bullet for him," Dante said, his voice rough. "You charged an armed soldier with a frying pan to protect my son." "Of course I did," Elena croaked. "I love him." "You could have died. You almost did die. The bullet missed your subclavian artery by centimeters." Dante's hands were shaking as he reached for hers. I can't lose you. I can't lose anyone else." "You didn't lose me. I'm right here." Elena squeezed his hand weakly. "Lucas?" "Safe. Traumatized but safe. He won't leave your door. Victor had to promise him you'd wake up before he'd even eat." Dante's voice cracked. "He loves you. We both love you. And you almost died because of my world, my enemies, my failure to protect you. Not your failure. Your world, yes, but I chose to stay. I chose this family. I chose the danger along with the love." Elena tried to sit up, gasped at the pain, and let Dante help her adjust the bed. "How bad is it?" "Through and through. Miss the bone. You'll heal completely with physical therapy." Dante's jaw clenched. 4 of my men were injured. 1 is critical. 8 Merinos dead, 2 captured. The threat is contained. Contained? Eliminated. The Merinos no longer exist as an organization. His voice was cold, final, and Elena understood what that meant. Dante had gone to war and won, had destroyed an entire crime family to protect his son and her. She should have been horrified. Instead, she felt safe. "Can I see Lucas?" "Are you sure you're—" "Please, he needs to see that I'm okay." Dante nodded and left, returning moments later with Lucas, who was pale and red-eyed and clutching his inhaler like a lifeline. The moment he saw Elena awake, he burst into tears and ran to the bed, and Dante had to catch him before he could jostle her injured shoulder. "Careful, Sinochuk. Elena needs to heal." "You promised," Lucas sobbed. "You promised you wouldn't leave, and then there was blood and you stopped moving, and I thought, I know, brave boy, I know." Elena held out her good arm and Lucas carefully climbed onto the bed, curling against her side. "But I'm okay. See? Still here. Still your teammate. You saved me. The bad man was going to hurt me and you stopped him. That's what teammates do. They protect each other." Elena kissed the top of his head, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, feeling his small body shake with residual fear. "And you were so brave. You listened to me. You hid. You stayed safe. I'm so proud of you. But you got hurt because of me." "No." Elena made her voice firm. "I got hurt because bad people made bad choices. Not because of you. Never because of you. You are worth protecting, Lucas. You are worth everything." Lucas cried harder, and Elena held him while Dante stood at the foot of the bed, his expression raw with emotion. They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them together, healing and whole and alive. Eventually, Lucas fell asleep against Elena's side, exhausted from fear and relief, and Dante carefully moved him to a chair, covering him with a blanket. "Thank you," Dante said quietly, returning to Elena's side, "for saving him, for loving him, for staying when anyone else would have run. I meant what I said. I chose this family." Elena touched his face, feeling the stubble, the warmth, the realness of him. "I choose you, both of you, whatever that means. It means danger. It means violence. It means living with guards and threats and the constant possibility that someone will try to use you to hurt me." Dante's voice was heavy with guilt. "It means I can never give you a normal life. I don't want normal. I want real. I want this. Messy and complicated and dangerous, but real. I want family dinners and bedtime stories and teaching Lucas about asthma. I want you, with all your darkness and danger and devotion." Elena pulled him closer. "I want this life, Dante. With you, with Lucas, with all of it." Dante kissed her, careful of her injuries, and Elena tasted salt. Tears, though she wasn't sure if they were his or hers. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good, be terrified together. That's what families do." They stayed like that, foreheads together, breathing the same air, until Lucas stirred and mumbled in his sleep. Dante went to him, soothing him back to rest, and Elena watched them. Her family, her choice, her future, and knew that despite everything, despite the danger and the violence and the absolute insanity of falling in love with a crime boss, she'd made the right choice. Some things were worth any risk. Some things were worth everything. Love was one of those things. Family was another. And Elena had found both in the most unlikely place, with the most unlikely people, through the most unlikely circumstances. She'd been fired for giving free medicine to a dying child, and in losing everything, she'd gained more than she'd ever dreamed possible. The recovery took 2 weeks, during which Elena learned that Dante's medical wing was better equipped than most hospitals, that Lucas was the most devoted patient advocate in history, and that being injured in a crime boss's mansion meant receiving care that was both exceptional and slightly terrifying in its efficiency. Dante barely left her side except for essential business, and even then, he conducted meetings from her room, his hand finding hers whenever Lucas wasn't occupying that space. They didn't talk about what came next, about the FBI investigation into the Marino attack, about the bodies that had been removed from the estate, about the systematic destruction of an entire criminal organization. They didn't talk about the future or what Elena's role would be now that she'd been shot protecting Lucas. They just existed together, healing and whole and grateful to be alive. But eventually, reality intruded. Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI appeared at the estate with a warrant and questions, and Elena found herself sitting across from a woman who looked at her with a mixture of pity and calculation. "You're a pharmacist," Agent Chen said, flipping through a file. "Good student, no criminal record, lost your mother to cancer. You were fired for giving away medication, and less than 24 hours later, you're living in Dante Volkov's mansion. That's quite a trajectory." "I'm Lucas's caregiver," Elena said carefully. "That's all." "That's all?" Agent Chen raised an eyebrow. "You took a bullet for his son. You're recovering in his medical wing. His men call you Miss Elena with the kind of respect usually reserved for family." She leaned forward. "I can offer you a way out. Witness protection, new identity, full immunity for any crimes you might have witnessed. All you have to do is testify about what you've seen here." Elena thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No. You're choosing to stay with a known criminal, to raise his son in this world. I'm choosing to stay with my family, whatever that means legally, morally, or otherwise." Elena met Agent Chen's gaze directly. "Lucas has already lost his mother. I'm not going to abandon him too. And Dante—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Dante is a good father. Whatever else he might be, that's true." Agent Chen studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "You're making a mistake. These men don't change. This world doesn't get better. Eventually you'll end up dead or in prison, and that child will lose another person he loves. Maybe, or maybe I'll help them build something better. Maybe I'll be the reason Lucas grows up to choose a different path. Maybe love is stronger than you think." Elena's voice was steady. "I'm not testifying, I'm not leaving, and I'm not afraid of you or your investigation." After Agent Chen left, Elena found Dante in his study, staring out the window at the gardens where Lucas was playing under heavy guard. The FBI was here. "I know. Victor told me." Dante didn't turn around. "What did you tell them?" "That I'm staying, that I'm not testifying, that they can investigate all they want, but they won't get anything from me." Now Dante turned, and Elena saw surprise and something deeper in his expression. "You could have taken the deal. You could have walked away clean." "I don't want clean. I want this." Elena moved to stand beside him, looking out at Lucas. "I want that child to grow up knowing someone chose to stay when staying was hard. I want him to know that love means commitment even when it's dangerous. I want—" She paused, then said the truth. "I want you. All of you. The crime boss and the father and the man who reads bedtime stories. I want this life." Dante pulled her into his arms, careful of her healing shoulder, and held her like she might disappear. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." They stood there watching Lucas play, and Elena felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or acceptance. She'd made her choice, and she'd keep making it every day. This was her family now. This was her life, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. The media discovered the story a week later. Fired pharmacist becomes mob boss's lover. And suddenly, Elena's face was everywhere. Her former colleagues were interviewed, some praising her compassion, others condemning her choices. Social media exploded with opinions, and Elena learned to ignore her phone, to avoid news sites, to let Dante's legal team handle the worst of it. But the attention brought something unexpected. Her old pharmacy school roommate, Jennifer, showed up at the estate gates asking to see her. Elena almost refused, but curiosity won, and she found herself sitting across from a woman she hadn't seen in 2 years. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay," Jennifer said, her eyes scanning Elena's face, her healing shoulder. "The news makes it sound like you've been kidnapped or brainwashed or something." "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." Elena smiled. "I know it looks crazy from the outside, but this is where I want to be." "With a criminal? Raising his 18-year-old son? Living under constant threat?" "With a man I love. Raising a child who needs me. Living a life that matters." Elena's voice was firm. "I help Lucas manage his asthma. I teach him about the world. I give him stability and love and hope. That's not crazy. That's exactly what I went to pharmacy school to do. Help people." Jennifer studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You look happy. Terrified but happy." "That's accurate," Elena admitted. "I'm scared every day, but I'm also fulfilled every day. I'm making a real difference in Lucas's life, and that matters more than safety or normalcy or public opinion." They talked for another hour, and Jennifer left with a promise to keep Elena's confidence, to tell the media vultures nothing, to remember that friendship meant supporting choices even when you didn't understand them. Elena watched her drive away and felt the last tie to her old life sever. She was fully committed now, to Dante, to Lucas, to this dangerous, complicated, beautiful life they were building together. That night, Dante found her in the library, and the look on his face made her heart skip. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's... He paused, seeming to struggle with words, then pulled a small box from his pocket. I've been thinking about this since you woke up from surgery, about what you mean to this family, about what I want our future to look like. Elena's breath caught as Dante opened the box to reveal a ring, antique, beautiful, with a diamond that caught the light like captured stars. This was my grandmother's. It's the only thing I have from before my father built this empire, before our family became what it is. It represents possibility, hope, a future that isn't defined by the past. He dropped to one knee, and Elena felt tears start to flow. I'm not offering you an easy life, Elena. I'm offering you a real one, with a man who loves you desperately and a boy who needs you completely. Marry me. Be Lucas's mother legally, my wife in every way. Choose this family knowing exactly what it means, the danger, the complications, the absolute insanity of it all. Choose us anyway. Elena was about to answer when small footsteps announced Lucas's arrival. He ran to them, his face bright with excitement. Are you asking Elena to marry us, Papa? Can she be my real mama? Dante looked at his son with such love that Elena's heart ached. That's up to Elena, Sinochak. Lucas turned to her, his expression serious. Please be my mama for real. I love you. I don't want you to ever leave. I want us to be a family forever. Elena looked at these two males who'd transformed her life. The crime boss with the gentle hands and the grieving heart, the child who taught her that courage meant loving again after loss. She thought about her mother, about the lessons she'd taught, about how love was always worth the risk. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, to both of you. Always yes. Dante slipped the ring onto her finger, and Lucas threw himself into their arms, and they held each other in the library while outside, guards patrolled and cameras watched and the dangerous world continued its dangerous business. But inside this moment, they were just a family. Imperfect and complicated and absolutely real. We're getting married, Lucas announced to anyone who would listen for the next week. Elena's going to be my mama, and we're going to be a family forever. The wedding planning was surreal. Dante wanted simple and private. Lucas wanted a party with cake and dancing, and Elena just wanted it to be real. They compromised on a ceremony in the estate gardens with a carefully vetted guest list that included Dante's legitimate business associates, a few of Elena's pharmacy school friends who'd supported her choices, and Lucas's new school friends with their parents. But before the wedding could happen, one final threat emerged. Victor pulled Dante aside during a family dinner, and Elena saw his expression go cold and hard. What's wrong? Victor Marino. He survived the purge. He's been in hiding, but our sources say he's planning something for the wedding. One final revenge. Elena felt ice flood her veins. Cancel it. Postpone it. We'll get married quietly. Somewhere he can't reach us. No. Dante's voice was steel. I'm not letting him control our lives anymore. I'm not letting him take this from us. He looked at Victor. What's the plan? Use the wedding as bait. Let him think he has an opening, but we control every variable. Extra security, undercover guards, Elena wearing a tracker. The moment he shows himself, we end this. You want to use our wedding as a trap. Elena's voice rose. You want to put Lucas in danger. Lucas will be with Victor in the secure wing. He won't be at the ceremony. Too risky. But you... Dante turned to her. I need you to trust me. Trust Victor. Trust that we can protect you while ending this threat permanently. Elena wanted to refuse, wanted to demand they postpone until it was safe, but she looked at Dante's face and understood. This wasn't just about Victor Marino. This was about refusing to live in fear, about building a future that wasn't defined by threats and violence, about choosing love even when it was dangerous. Okay, she said, but I want a weapon. I want training. I want to be able to protect myself if something goes wrong." Dante's expression shifted to something like pride. "Victor will train you. And Elena, thank you for trusting me, for being brave enough to do this." "We're a team," Elena said, echoing Lucas's words from months ago. "The bravest team. We protect each other." The next 3 days were intensive training. Victor teaching her how to recognize threats, how to move in a crisis, how to use the small handgun Dante insisted she carry. Elena hated every second of it, hated learning to think like prey, but she understood the necessity. Victor Marino had nothing left to lose, and that made him the most dangerous kind of enemy. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather and perfect tension. Elena stood in her suite, wearing a simple white dress that somehow cost more than her entire year's salary used to be, and tried to calm her racing heart. Lucas had been taken to the secure wing an hour ago, protesting that he wanted to see her get married, and Elena had promised him they'd have a private ceremony later, just the three of them. Jennifer helped her with her hair, chattering nervously about how beautiful the gardens looked, how handsome Dante was in his suit, how romantic this all was. Elena let her talk, grateful for the distraction, trying not to think about the fact that she was wearing a tracker, that half the wedding guests were actually undercover security, that somewhere out there, a man who wanted to kill her was planning his move. "You're sure about this?" Jennifer asked quietly. "It's not too late to run." "I'm sure. This is my family. This is my choice." Elena touched the ring Dante had given her, his grandmother's ring, a symbol of hope and possibility. "I love them. That's worth any risk." The ceremony was beautiful despite the underlying tension. Dante stood at the altar looking devastating in a black suit, his eyes never leaving Elena's face as she walked down the aisle. The officiant spoke about love and commitment and building a future together, and Elena tried to focus on the words, on Dante's hands holding hers, on the rightness of this moment. But she was also aware of Victor positioned near the garden entrance, of the guards stationed at regular intervals, of the weight of the gun strapped to her thigh under her dress. She was getting married in a bulletproof vest disguised as shapewear, and that should have been absurd, but instead felt necessary. They were exchanging vows when Elena saw Victor's expression change, saw him touch his earpiece, saw him start moving toward them with purpose. Everything seemed to slow down, Dante's eyes widening as he saw Victor's approach, the guests starting to murmur, Elena's hand moving instinctively toward her weapon. Victor Marino appeared from behind the rose garden, a gun in his hand, his face twisted with rage and grief. "You took everything from me. My sons, my business, my life. Now I take everything from you." Dante moved to shield Elena, but she was faster. All that training with Victor paying off as she pulled her weapon and fired. Not to kill, just to disable, just to stop the threat. Her shot hit Victor's gun hand, and he dropped the weapon with a scream. Dante's guards were on him in seconds, and Victor appeared beside Elena, his expression approving. "Good shot. Clean, controlled, exactly what I taught you." Elena was shaking, adrenaline flooding her system, and Dante pulled her into his arms. "It's over. He's the last one. It's finally over." The guests were in chaos, some fleeing, some trying to help, everyone talking at once, but Elena just held on to Dante and tried to process what had just happened. She'd shot someone. She'd used violence to protect her family. She'd crossed a line she'd never thought she'd cross. "I shot him," she said numbly. "I actually shot him." "You stopped him. You protected us. You did what had to be done." Dante's voice was gentle but firm. "This is my world, Elena. This is what it means to be part of this family. Sometimes love requires violence. Sometimes protection requires crossing lines." Elena pulled back to look at his face, at the understanding there, at the acceptance. "I don't regret it. That's what scares me. I don't regret shooting him. Because you were protecting people you love. That's not something to regret. That's something to be proud of." Dante kissed her forehead. "You're stronger than you think, braver than you know, and you're mine, my wife, my partner, my equal." The wedding was officially over, but they gathered in the family room, Elena, Dante, Victor, and a few key guards, to debrief. Victor Marino was in custody. The FBI was involved, and Dante's lawyers were already working on a deal. The threat was over. The Marino family was done. They could finally breathe. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now we live," Dante said simply. "We raise Lucas. We build a future. We be a family." He touched her face. "Now we get to be happy." They held a second private ceremony that evening, just Dante, Elena, and Lucas in the library with Victor as witness. Lucas wore his best suit and took his role as ring-bearer seriously, and when the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Lucas shouted, "No, she's my mama now, and nobody can take her away." Elena laughed through tears, and Dante smiled his rare, genuine smile, and they exchanged vows that were real and honest and full of love. When they kissed, Lucas cheered and demanded cake, and they celebrated with just the three of them, a family finally complete. 6 months passed in a blur of adjustment and joy. Elena established her free clinic in Brooklyn, using Dante's resources to provide health care to underserved communities. She treated patients 3 days a week, including many from families connected to Dante's world, and she never asked questions about how they could afford care. She just provided it. It was the work she'd always wanted to do, and doing it with unlimited resources felt like a dream. Dante gradually transitioned his operations toward legitimate businesses, using his testimony deal to eliminate competitors while building legal enterprises. He still had his dark side, still did things Elena didn't ask about, but he was trying to build a future Lucas could be proud of. The FBI investigation continued, but Dante's lawyers kept him insulated, and slowly, carefully, he was becoming more businessman than criminal. Lucas thrived. His asthma was well-managed, his nightmares rare, his laughter frequent. He excelled in school, made friends, and talked constantly about wanting to be a doctor like his mama. He still missed his mother, they all did, but the grief had transformed from crushing weight to manageable sadness. They visited Katerina's grave together, told her about their lives, promised to honor her memory by being happy, and Elena found herself more content than she'd ever been. She had a family, a purpose, work that mattered, and love that made every danger worth it. She'd lost her old life completely, but she'd gained something infinitely more valuable. One evening, she found herself back in her old Brooklyn neighborhood, standing outside Morrison's pharmacy where this had all started. The store looked the same, but Elena felt completely different, stronger, fiercer, more fully herself. A young woman emerged, struggling with a sick child, and Elena saw herself in that desperate face. "Excuse me," Elena said, approaching carefully. "I'm a pharmacist. Can I help?" The woman's story was familiar. No insurance, expensive medication, a child who needed help immediately. Elena didn't hesitate. She pulled out her wallet and handed the woman enough cash to cover the prescription and more. "For the medication and whatever else you need. No strings, just help your child." The woman stared at the money with tears in her eyes. "Why? You don't even know us." "Because someone helped me once when I had nothing. Because some things are more important than money. Because your child deserves to be healthy." Elena smiled. "Pay it forward someday, when you can. That's all I ask." She walked away feeling her mother's presence, feeling the rightness of the choice she'd made all those months ago. She'd given away medicine to a dying child and lost everything. But in losing everything, she'd found her family, her purpose, her home. Lucas was waiting for her when she returned to the estate, bouncing with excitement about a school project. Dante was in his study but emerged when he heard her voice, his expression softening in the way it only did for her and Lucas. They gathered in the family room for dinner, Nothing fancy, just pasta and laughter and Lucas's endless chatter about his day. This was her life now. This was her family. And looking at Dante's smile and Lucas's joy, Elena knew she'd make the same choice again. She'd give away that medicine, lose that job, enter this dangerous world, all of it, because it had led her here, to love, to family, to home. 2 years after Elena had been fired for giving free medicine to a dying child, she stood in her clinic watching a mother hold her healthy son and felt the circle complete. The boy had been sick, desperately sick, and Elena had used every resource at her disposal to save him. The mother couldn't pay, but Elena didn't care. Some things were more important than money. Lucas appeared in the clinic doorway, now 9. Years old and healthy and happy with Dante behind him. They'd come to pick her up for dinner, and Lucas ran to her with the enthusiasm of a child who knew he was loved. "Mama, Papa says we can get ice cream if you're done helping people." Elena laughed and hugged him, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, feeling his solid weight in her arms. "I'm done. Let's get ice cream." They walked out together, Elena, Dante, and Lucas, a family forged from impossible circumstances, built on compassion and courage and love. The clinic door closed behind them, and Elena saw her reflection in the glass. A woman transformed, a life redeemed, a choice that had cost everything and given her more than she'd ever dreamed. She'd been fired for giving free medicine to a Mafia boss's sick son, and that single act of compassion had changed everything, had saved a child, transformed a man, built a family, created a legacy. Sometimes the bravest thing was saying yes to love, even when the world said no. Sometimes the right choice was the dangerous one. Sometimes losing everything was the only way to gain what truly mattered. Elena took Dante's hand, felt Lucas's small hand in her other one, and walked toward their future with no regrets, no fear, only gratitude for the medicine that had changed everything, not the kind that came in bottles, but the kind that came from the heart. Love, family, home, the most powerful medicine of all. Did this story touch your heart? If you loved Elena and Dante's journey, please hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional tales of love, courage, and second chances. Share this with someone who needs to believe that sometimes the most dangerous choices lead to the most beautiful destinations. Drop a comment telling me which moment made you cry. I read every single one, and your support means everything. What should I cover next? More Mafia romance? Medical drama? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for being here and being part of this community. Until next time, remember, sometimes the bravest thing is choosing love over safety, family over fear, and compassion over common sense. See you in the next story.